Alrighty then, we move on ahead with part 2 of 10 usages in advanced English. Thanks to all those who supported part 1, and for those who missed out on the video, a link should be appearing on your screen right about now. You may check it out now or later, all in your sweet time. For now, let's get the ball rolling and move on ahead with advanced expression number 6. So like the previous video, we start out easy. We have usage number 6 wherein we make use of should in place of if. Now, of course, this is a formal usage and the format of the use is thus. You've got should followed by the subject followed by the verb. So whenever you're talking about an imaginary situation wherein you can make use of the conditional if, you can surely go ahead and replace that if with should to impart your sentence a more formal and elegant appeal. Let's check out some examples. So our first sentence reads, should you wish to cancel the order, please call customer care. And this is the exact same as saying, if you wish to cancel the order, please call customer care. Moving on to the next example, the sentence reads, should it rain, call off the game. And that means, if it rains, call off the game. Call off over here is a phrasal verb that means to cancel an ongoing or a scheduled event. Now over here there's an important observation that I'd like you to make, which is regarding the verb. So whenever you're replacing if with should in any sentence, your verb is going to return or retreat to its base or infinitive form without any verb endings like s, es or ies. Observe. So originally, if we use if in this very sentence, you would have that usage as already discussed as if it rains, call off the game. However, as you can see over here, we've employed should in place of if, and that returns our verb, which is rain, to its base form from rains back to rain, giving you the sentence, should it rain and not rains, as in case of if, should it rain, call off the game. Our third sentence reads, should the director be away, and away is another way of saying not available for a meeting. So you've got that sentence once again as, should the director be away, postpone the meeting until next week. And that's the exact as saying, if the director is away, postpone the meeting until next week. Now, surely you have noticed that be turns to is in case of if, as if the director is away. But once we introduce should as a replacement for if in the sentence, is returns to its base or infinitive form, which is be. Now, you're definitely aware that is, am, are, was, were are all verbs that are born of the infinitive be, giving you the sentence as, should the director be away, postpone the meeting until next week. On to the next sentence, should anyone call, tell them I'm busy. And this is saying, if anyone calls, tell them I'm busy. And the final example, should he complain, feel free to bring him to me. And this says, if he complains, or the more formal, if he should complain. So once again, if he complains, feel free to bring him to me. Now before we move on, another little observation this time regarding the punctuation. So you'd observe in all these sentences that your first half of the sentence or clause over here, we have dependent clauses before the comma. Now, what is a dependent clause? A dependent clause is part of a full complex sentence which is unable to complete the thought on its own or is unable to give you the full meaning. So as you can see over here, we have dependent clauses falling before the comma as should he complain, should anyone call, should the director be away. Now surely these do not provide enough information or the complete thought, and that's why you have to couple them up with an independent clause, sentences which are complete on their own. And how do you join the two? You're going to make sure that whenever you have this usage where you have should as if and you have a dependent clause starting the sentence, do separate your dependent clause with a comma from the independent clause. You can't have such a usage running on without a comma. That's going to lead on to a situation called a run-on sentence. So do ensure that in such usages, your first clause is separated from the second with a comma. So this was advanced usage number 6, the use of should as if. Should you have any questions or queries, feel free to post them in the comment section. We move on to advanced usage number 7. Seventh advanced usage on our list is but for, and but for is an idiomatic way of saying if it were not for. Now I know that doesn't really help, so let's try another approach, shall we? In other words, but for is used in a sentence to introduce the reason why something didn't happen. You have an event mentioned in a sentence which was possible, which was likely to happen, but a reason stopped it from happening. And to mention that reason, we introduce but for in the sentence. So the format of the usage is going to be as follows. You will have an event mentioned in the sentence, a possible event in a sentence. That's going to be followed by but for, and but for will immediately be followed by the reason that stopped that probable or possible event from happening. I know if things still seem foggy, we've got plenty of examples coming up. Let's go to them right away. So our first example reads, I would have failed the exam but for my sister's guidance. So let's say you took an exam for which your sister helped you prepare, and had she not done so, you may have possibly failed the exam. So what is that probable event mentioned in the sentence that did not happen? It was your failing the exam, expressed with would have. Now we use the perfect conditional would have when we mention things that are imaginary and did not take place. So once again, that imaginary event that was stopped from happening, I would have failed the exam. What stopped it from happening? That was your sister's guidance, or in the sentence, my sister's guidance. So going to that format, you've got the probable event in the sentence right here, followed by but for, and but for will immediately have the reason written after it, and you have the exact same happening in this sentence. I would have failed the exam but for my sister's guidance. Probable event plus but for plus my sister's guidance. And this is another way of saying that I would have failed the exam if it were not for my sister's guidance. Or for further understanding, you can even take it as I would have failed the exam, but I did not because of my sister's guidance. I hope that helps. Let's go to the next example. Our next example is we would have lost our way but for the GPS. Now GPS, as you know, your car navigation system that helps you find your way to your destination. So that sentence, once again, we would have lost our way. So what is that possible or probable event that was averted from happening? That is you losing your way. What stopped it from happening? You've got that as the GPS or your car navigation. Once again, setting it into that format of the probable event plus but for plus the reason, you've got we would have lost our way but for the GPS. We would have lost our way if it were not for the GPS. Or finally, we would have lost our way but we did not because of the GPS. Next example coming up. Now in this next example of ours, we're going to try an inversion. Now what is an inversion? An inversion takes place when we interchange the order of the two clauses within a sentence. That's to say, that's the first clause becomes the second clause and the second clause becomes the first. Let's try that out over here. So what's going to essentially happen is that instead of having the reason follow up the event, we are going to first mention the reason, insert a comma there, and then have the probable event that was stopped as a result of that reason. And you have that example as, but for the foul weather, we would have had a great game. Now, what is that probable event over here? That was to have had a great game. That did not happen. What was the reason for that? The reason for that was the foul weather. Now, this is a perfectly valid usage in case you're wondering that we are straying away from the format. That's totally all right. This is an inversion. We're breaking the rule ever so slightly, but this is another advanced, sophisticated usage. The only difference over here that's going to be observed is that we will, however, insert a comma immediately after the reason or the dependent clause. I call it the dependent clause, as already discussed in the previous section, because it is not a complete thought. We need more information to make sense of the whole sentence. So you've got that remaining sense following up after the comma, which is the independent clause. We would have had a great time. So once again, you have that sentence as but for the foul weather, we would have had a great game. Another way of saying, if it were not for the foul weather, we would have had a great game, or we would have had a great game, but we didn't have it because of the foul weather. On to the next example. Our next example is, he would have won the race but for a sudden cramp. And that's to say that he would have won the race if it were not for a sudden cramp, or he would have won the race but he did not because of the sudden cramp. Moving along, the next one is, I would have made it on time, and made it is I would have reached on time. So I would have made it on time but for the traffic. And that goes on to say that I would have made it on time if it were not for the traffic. I would have made it on time, but I could not because of the traffic. And finally, the patient would not have survived but for the doctor's thinking on his feet. So to think on your feet means to think on the spot instantly and come up with solutions. So once again, that sentence, the patient would not have survived but for the doctor's thinking on his feet, or the patient would not have survived if it were not for the doctor's thinking on his feet. Now I realize this section may have felt a bit of a drag. I would have kept it shorter but for its tricky nature. So that's it for but for. On to advanced usage number 8. Things are light and breezy at number 8. We've got the expression, I stand corrected, which is a more elegant way of saying, I accept that I was wrong. So whenever somebody discovers that something they thought to be true, a belief, a fact, or an opinion, actually turns out to be wrong, they accept their mistake by saying, I stand corrected. Now this is a very useful expression as well, for the reason that the native English speakers tend to use it a whole lot more vis-a-vis the non-native speakers. So it does help impart that coveted native touch to your language. Let's go ahead with some examples. So let's say two people were busy working out a maths problem, but they had disagreement regarding the answer. But soon enough, one of them finds out that they were wrong, and this is how they admit to their mistake. You have the sentence as, you were right, the answer is 99 and not 101. I stand corrected. I accept that I was wrong. On to another one. The sentence reads, I stand corrected. The correct answer is B, not A. They found out their mistake and they accept that, saying, I stand corrected. Another example, I told you to take the left. Now, all those drivers who never listen to their co-passenger, they've made a blunder by taking a right and not the left. They find out and then they admit to their mistake. Once again, that sentence, I told you to take the left, but you didn't listen. And to that, the driver responds once they find out that they've gone wrong, you're right. I stand corrected. And a final example, I stand corrected. The company was formed in 1927 and not in 1929. A fact about the establishment of a company, they were not too certain about the date, and once they find out, they accept that as I stand corrected. The company was formed in 1927 and not in 1929. So this was advanced usage number 8. Let's move on to usage number 9. At number 9, we've got the phrase, none the wiser, which in negative sentences involving not, no one, nobody, and similar negative words becomes any the wiser. And this is used in two situations. Let's start with the first one. The first one is when someone doesn't understand something, even though it has been explained. Let's check out the sentences. We've got the first one as, I explained my heart out. Now, when I say heart out, it doesn't mean that the speaker is letting out his feelings. Whenever you do something your heart out, for example, play your heart out, speak your heart out, it means you do it with a lot of sincerity. So over here, the person is explaining with a lot of sincerity. So once again, that usage, and by the way, this is an informal usage, explain your heart out. So going back to that, I explained my heart out, but she was none the wiser. And this goes on to suggest that I explained very sincerely, but she did not understand. Taking another example, we've got, I've read the instructions twice, and I'm still none the wiser. And that says that I've read the instructions twice, and I still don't understand. So you may have observed that none the wiser can be used in any of the tenses, be it past, present, or the future. We've talked about past and present, future is coming up. So that's about the first use of none the wiser. On to the second one, and this is a more sly usage. Let's check it out. This is used for someone who doesn't find out about something. So when something has been done on the sly, secretly, and somebody else doesn't find out, so we will call them that they were none the wiser about it. Let's check out the sentence. The first one reads, I secretly borrowed his car, but he was none the wiser. And that goes on to suggest that I secretly borrowed his car, but he didn't come to know, or he didn't find out. On to a final one, crime in progress over here. And the sentence reads, we will replace legit money with counterfeit notes, and none would be any the wiser. This time we've got a negative word in here. None is being used as no one, and that's why that's followed up with any the wiser and not none the wiser. So once again, that sentence, we will replace legit money, that's real or legal money, with counterfeit or fake notes, and none or no one will find out. So there you go. That's usage number 9. None the wiser, used for two situations: when somebody doesn't understand something despite an explanation, and the second one when somebody doesn't find out about an event that has taken place secretly without them knowing it. That's usage number 9. On to the final usage, advanced usage number 10. So I've saved the trickiest for the end. At number 10, we've got the usage lest, which is a formal conjunction. Now, lest has two distinct uses. The first one being when we are talking about a situation wherein we wish to avoid the possibility of a future event from taking place. So in other words, lest serves as a replacement for so that something doesn't happen. I know it doesn't really clear things up, so let's go to some examples right away. Our first example reads, look after your health lest you lose it permanently. And this is the exact same as saying, look after your health. Look after over here is a phrasal verb that means to take care. So once again, look after your health so that you don't lose it permanently. Now, an important point about the usage of lest over here, some people tend to include the not in a sentence, turning it into a negative along with sentences involving lest. They follow lest up with don't or doesn't. Now, what that does is, since lest already contains, its meaning is inclusive of the not or the don't or the doesn't, so adding another not in the same sentence works like a double negative, reversing the sense. So if you turn this sentence into look after your health lest you don't lose it permanently, the sense, the meaning that it conveys becomes rather ironic and funny. The sentence that I just spoke out would bear the meaning, look after your health so that you lose it permanently. Now, surely you didn't intend to say that, so do ensure that in sentences with lest, you avoid the use of the negative not. Moving on to the next example. The next example is, he put the milk in the fridge lest it go off. Once again, go off too is a phrasal verb over here that expresses milk going sour. So if milk goes bad or goes sour in British English, you have the phrasal verb, the milk goes off. The American usage, on the other hand, the popular American usage is to go bad, milk goes bad. So once again, that sentence, he put the milk in the fridge lest it go off, the exact same as saying, he put the milk in the fridge so that it doesn't go off. Now, another important point about the usage of lest is that lest employs the subjunctive mood in sentences, which is to say that whatever be your pronoun in the sentence, let it be the personal pronoun rather, I, you, we, they, he, she, it, all of them will follow the verb in the base, root, or the infinitive form. You won't have lest it goes off. You're going to instead have lest it go off, and this rule remains. And a final point now about the usage of lest. I know too many rules in there, but just want to get it perfect, which is that you will often come across sentences with lest that employ the modal verb should following up lest, such as he put the milk in the fridge lest it should go off. And also, once again, look after your health lest you should lose it permanently. I'd like you to know that you may or may not include that should in the sentence. It doesn't hamper the sense or the grammar. So with that, we move on to the second use for lest. So in the second use of lest, we have it as a replacement for the phrase in case. Let's look at a few examples. The first one reads, she took an extra jacket lest she feel cold. And that's the exact same as saying she took an extra jacket in case she feels cold. So you see that subjunctive mood at work over here. You've got in case she feels cold, but you have lest she feel cold and not feels. And the reason for that is we use the subjunctive mood in order to express imaginary or hypothetical situations, which is exactly the case here, and hence the use of the subjunctive. On to the last example that reads, he kept his camera ready lest he spot a wild animal. Let's say somebody's out on a safari and you have that sentence as he kept his camera ready in case he spots a wild animal. Now, I do realize that lest is a slippery and elusive concept. So in order to facilitate your learning further, I've taken the liberty to gather up a sort of example bank of sentences for your convenience that's going to flash over your screen for the next 5 seconds. You may go ahead, pause, and read it for better learning. Let's go. So that's a wrap, everyone. The second part of 10 usages in Advanced English delivered as promised. A lot of effort has in fact gone into choosing the best usages to be explained here. So if you've liked the effort, please go ahead and reward it with your precious like. Till then, I'll be working hard on something useful as usual, and we'll be back with the same to you very soon. Till then, please keep sharing, liking, and supporting. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers.